What's up, everybody? Matthew Myers, Ignite Financial 2024. Hey, I had somebody asked me recently, and I said, "Okay, what exactly is a stock?" And I realized that we often talk about stocks and mutual funds and bonds, and maybe I take for granted that individuals know what that means. So I think it's worth you know informing individuals what exactly is a stock, right? So when you hear something like Microsoft stock is up $1 today, is that good? Is that bad? What exactly is that stock and what does it represent? So owning stock means that you own a portion or a share of that company. And so you can look at the number of shares outstanding on that company to figure out what part of ownership you own of that company. So if you own one share of a company and it has 1,000,000 shares outstanding, it means you own 1/1,000,000th of that company. If it had 10 shares outstanding, you would own 1/10 of that company. So the actual value of the stock is one thing, but how much ownership it represents is going to be something completely different. If the stock in its entirety is worth $1,000,000, and you have one share and it's worth $10 per share, then that's going to be worth more than a company that's worth $1 billion, and one of their shares is worth $10 per share. One has more shares outstanding to represent $1 billion versus $1,000,000. And so it's going to tell you something about the size of the company itself, at least the market cap of that company, and what your share represents. So if we take a look at example, Apple and Microsoft right now are currently in that $3 trillion cap range. If I own $1,000 worth of both companies, hey, kudos to me for owning $1,000 of those companies. But as part of the ownership of the whole, right, I'm just a speck of dust. However, if it was a more localized company or smaller company and I owned $1,000 of it, it could represent more ownership. It could be, a percent of ownership. Likely not in the stock market, but outside of the stock market, that's how it works as well. So it's just a form of ownership. You hear talk about equity, right? Stock and equity often are interchanged. So stocks are a form of equity, which is just a form of ownership within a company. So they can be used interchangeably. So by owning a part of this company, you're betting on its future. You're betting that the future, this company is going to be worth more than it is now currently worth. And how are they going to do that? Well, ideally by creating value, selling more of their goods and services, having a higher penetration rate in the market. That means that more and more people are using their product. Maybe they're making more per product. So there's a lot of ways that companies can add value. And lots of times they try to do it on multiple channels, right? So they're trying to increase their profit margin. They're trying to increase the number of people that are using their product. They're trying to increase the amount of products that they offer to the public, so more and more individuals can use their products. And so as people become more ingrained in using those products, the more valuable that company is gonna be. If we talk about Microsoft, for example, there aren't very many businesses that you're going to find that don't use a Microsoft product of some type. It could be as simple as using Outlook for their email. It could be using an Excel spreadsheet. It could be using Word documents. It could be using the servers that Microsoft now offers, or it could be using some of their security software. So there's so many things that Microsoft does. Almost every business out there is going to have something of Microsoft brand, even if they don't like Microsoft. They could say they hate Microsoft, but they don't really have a choice to get away from what Microsoft does. Obviously, they could say that I'm an Apple person, I use Apple products, and Apple does the same thing, right? I mean, you can have an iPad, you can have Apple Music, you can use their servers as well. There's so much depth to what Apple provides that even if you are saying just an exclusive Apple user, you could still potentially cross over, use some Microsoft products, or vice versa. A Microsoft user could cross over and use some Apple products just because of the real or perceived what's the word I'm looking for? Value that they have. It's not the word I'm looking for. You guys know what I'm talking about. So obviously you're buying a company with the idea that in the future they're going to be worth more. If you look at a company and you say, listen, their product, it's becoming irrelevant. They're not innovating. Then that's probably a company that you don't want to purchase. But you need to do some research, maybe work with somebody, and say, is there value to what I'm looking at? And so they can potentially look through the financials and see if there's something that raises alarms. It could be a huge increase in debt. It could be shrinking profit margins, shrinking profit share. And they haven't reduced their footprint to accommodate that, right? It's going to be a situation where the debt could overwhelm the company and they could go out of business at some point in time. So there's all sorts of examples of great companies that just failed to innovate, thought they were so supreme in every way that nobody else could ever do what they do, and then they get killed by the competition. Great example of that would be HP, Hewlett Packard. Hewlett Packard was like the gold standard. IBM was right up there as well. There's no way that they saw the threat that Microsoft was to them, and then eventually Microsoft overtaking what they did. They were the gold standard. They were untouchable until Apple surpassed them, Microsoft surpassed them, and now they're constantly playing catch up to those two companies. So take a look at the company. Is it innovating? Is it so stuck in its ways it fails to innovate? And what kind of danger does that present to you as an investor? So you want to, if you're buying individual stocks, you certainly want to take advantage of what's out there and what could rise in value, but also be aware of your current holdings and what danger lurks with those current holdings. So let's see, the risk and return. So investing in stocks does carry risk. So the risk in investing in stocks is going to vary from company to company and even exchange to exchange. So the requirements to be on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange are going to be much, much higher than being listed on what they refer to as like the pink sheets or over-the-counter stocks. Lots of times the requirements are minimal to be listed on those. You certainly want to use caution as an investor when you're dealing with micro-cap stocks. So if we look at companies like Microsoft, for example, if you take a look at their split adjusted basis, people say, well, man, this company used to be worth pennies, right? Well, that's because once a company kind of gets a certain size, a lot of times they'll split the stock. And what that means is that they take the number of shares that they have and split them so there's additional shares outstanding. And lots of times what that's going to do is going to reduce the price per share. And that could make it more accessible to retail investors to purchase that stock. If the stock is $10,000 or $100,000 or $200,000 per share, it mainly leaves it up to institutional investors to make those purchases. Well, if it's $50 or $100 or $200 per share, it's going to allow individual retail investors to get into it. So that's why they split that stock. When they do that, it adjusts the original basis. So let's say, for example, a stock started off trading at $20 per share. So initially you go back in the history, you see it's $20 per share, but they split once, right? Now it shows their initial price was $10 per share. They split again, right? It shows their initial price was $5 per share. Split again, shows that's $2.50. So that's not actually what they started selling off at. So people will say, okay, well, Microsoft started trading off at pennies per share when it first started. Well, that's not true. I mean, they were a well-established company. And they had a product that the public wanted, and I think they started off around $15 per share, somewhere in that range. So when we're dealing with microcap stocks that are like on the pink sheets, over-the-counter stocks, there's not as much reporting requirements for them. And so just because you're seeing a stock that's worth 2 cents or even fractional shares, you might see like 0.002, right? And you're like, man, I could pick up 10,000 shares of this from like next to nothing. There's a much higher probability on those exchanges of the company going into default and going out of business than it is for the company to get out of the situation that they're currently in when they're traded at valuations like that. So use a lot of caution. A lot of the pump and dump schemes that we see is going to be in those penny stocks. And what pump and dump schemes are is where somebody's promoting that stock. And so the stock could be trading at 2 cents per share. They do all this marketing and blitzing. You might even get a message on your phone saying, hey, Tim, you got to buy this stock. Listen, man, I can't talk right now. Just pick up as many shares as you can. Here's the symbol. Call me back. You know my number, right? And they weren't trying to reach Tim, right? They're trying to reach you and leaving a fake number. So enough people go in there. You say, man, 2 cents per share. The stock is hot. I'm getting all this information about it. This accidental email, this accidental voicemail. All of a sudden, it's 15 cents per share. The people promoting it sell all their shares. The stock price crashes, and you're left with a stock that's worthless. So be very, very careful when it comes to those microcaps because there's a lot of risk involved with it. But if we get beyond that, we get into established companies, even small cap companies, which in the small cap world, in the stock market, we're talking about companies that have a market cap of $100 million. So we're not talking about very, very tiny mom and pop corner stores here. We're talking about well-established companies. So even in the small cap world, there's risk there, but it's not going to be like the micro cap area, right? The risk of a default or a company going out of business is going to be minimized. It's going to be reduced dramatically. And as we go up into companies like the Microsofts, the Apples, right, the risk is going to be less. There could be a lot more volatility. There could be volatility still associated with that stock, but the risk is going to be less. It is important to look at every single company, be aware of exactly what's happening inside that company, understand there's risk that you simply cannot account for. The government could make a rule change that could completely eliminate an industry. So there's certainly risk out there that you can't always account for, but certainly work with a professional when trying to analyze, value stocks. Understand that stocks are ownership. You're hoping to buy a company that's going to increase in value over time. Your share is going to increase in time. If the company makes some cash and they want to give some cash back to its shareholders, they'll do so in the form of dividends. So you could own the company and create income flow for you as well. So a lot to know about stocks. They're fun. It's an exciting area. Certainly work with an investor who knows what they're doing. Work with an advisor. If you're getting into individual stocks, learn the true risk associated with them. Learn what diversification looks like if you're purchasing multiple stocks. Understand that we have a tendency to look to our own industry. So if you're in the oil industry, maybe you own like 10 oil companies because that's what you know, right? But that's not going to be diversification, right? It's just you're all in one sector. So learn about proper, diversification. Talk to somebody. Any questions? Give me a phone call. Shoot me an email. Leave me a message. I will reach out to you and talk about that and get your situation taken care of. Matthew Myers, Ignite Financial. Have a great day.